Hi guys, Shannon here. I wanted to make a video about the latest training that the church has put out on protecting youth and children. I put a link to it below in my description, and you do have to be a member to access it because you got to have a username and password. But I just wanted to kind of briefly run over the training because my bishop texted it to me when I had texted him asking about did they lower the child interview age to 8, and he said not yet, but here also, by the way, is the training that the church put out for protecting youth and children, and just to let you know, like, they're trying to be more proactive in protecting children and acknowledging that sexual abuse happens. So he sent me that and I clicked on it and I did the training. So I am certified to work with Mormon youth. Not that I intend on going back, but you know, just mostly out of curiosity as to what is happening now in the church as far as that. I guess my initial impression is that it's kind of just a band-aid that is being put on a broken system. I mean, on the one hand, it's good that the church is trying to make efforts, but it kind of just feels like, I don't know, like the 2014 Gospel Topics essays, that their hand was forced. They have to put this information out there because we have internet access and we're seeing this information anyways. And just like that, with all the sexual abuse cases that are coming up, that are bishops and stake presidents that are going to prison because they are abusing people in their wards and stakes, and the church doesn't have a choice but to address this issue because it's facing them front and center in the news. So a 30-minute training every 3 years not done by professionals, that doesn't really address the true, like from a true standpoint of psychology or, you know, clinical. It's not clinical at all. It just doesn't feel adequate. And even if it were adequate, if you still have grown men with access to minors behind closed doors, being able to ask them a free reign of whatever they want to ask them, it's still a broken system, and it doesn't address the root problem. So, speaking of which, I also am going to put a link to Sam Young's petition in my description. So if you will just take the 5 seconds it takes to hop on there and sign that petition, that would be awesome. It's a petition that basically is asking for no more interviews, closed door one-on-one interviews between an adult and a child in any religion. So there's really no need for that. There's never been a need for that. And the reason that the church, or any church that I can imagine would do that, as I talked about in a previous video, is just early access to their young minds to indoctrinate them or to shame them, or both. Control, manipulation, all that. So even if you are an active, believing member of the church and you have children in the church, you should be there in an interview when your child is interviewed by any leader of the church. Because if you don't believe that this is still a problem, you are sticking your head in the sand. There was a bishop arrested just last month. We're in the year 2019, October of 2019. Actually, today's November 1st. He was arrested in Kaysville, Utah. He was a bishop in Kaysville, Utah, and he was charged on child sexual abuse, also had child pornography on his laptop computer. He admitted to sexually abusing children in his own congregation. There was the guy in Pennsylvania a couple months ago. I think he was a stake president, and he was taking pictures of this girl in a dressing room, and I think Forever 21. So it's still happening. There was the guy in St. George, Utah, that was part of a sex ring in St. George, and he had access, obviously, as any bishop does, to his whole congregation, and was using that power and authority to coerce some of these people people in his ward into being into this sex ring. It's really terrible that it's still happening, but to pretend that it's not, or to say that we just forgive people and try to look the other way, that's not Christ-like, and that's not what Jesus would do. Look at him overturning the tables of the money changers in the temple. If there is a problem, if there is a sin that's happening, if there is an abuse that's happening against his children, the Lord would do something about it. I'm not saying I necessarily believe in God anymore, but from a Mormon perspective, if you believe in God, then you cannot say that God would be okay with these behaviors and that he would look the other way. Otherwise, I really want nothing to do with the God you believe in. So back to the training. So interestingly, they opened the training with a disclaimer saying that they're not going to address all aspects of abuse, which is a really weird disclaimer, because if there's abuse that's happening, especially in the Mormon church, let's talk about it, because that's the whole reason of this training. We're trying to prevent further abuse, right? So why would they open the training by saying that they're not going to talk about all forms of abuse? I just think that's really bizarre. So what that did really was kind of prick my ears up to, okay, well, what are we not talking about then? And I feel like the one thing that they kind of shied away from talking about really was the main abuse that happens, which is males in power abusing their power against females and or children, and that really wasn't addressed in the training. They talk about, not having extensive conversations one-on-one with youth. They talk about what sexual abuse is in a few sentences, like written sentences. But the only examples that they give of abuse are actually of women abusing children. In one case, it was a physical, so this girl comes to her youth activity and she's bruised up, and the leader's like, oh, what happened? And the girl says, oh, my mom hit me with a broomstick. And then the next slide is like, what should this leader do? And I just find that really odd that all these cases that are cropping up, that are in the real life cases that are happening, and not to be sexist, but they're all men sexually abusing children and or, anyone in their congregation. But the only examples they give are in this training are women. And then the other example, they didn't actually say it was abuse, but they were talking about like what is inappropriate touching. And then the cartoon example that they're showing is a woman's body, the adult, and then the child sitting there, like she's not actually touching her, but she's like reaching over to touch her shoulder or something. And they're talking about like what's appropriate versus inappropriate touching. But it's a woman, which I don't know why like every example they give is a female in the case of the abuser. So the other interesting thing that this video says is like there's a slide that goes to, if there's been abuse, what should you do? And it says if you're a bishop or a stake president, you should immediately, and you know of abuse, you should immediately call the church's helpline. Which, as far as I understand, the church's helpline goes to a law firm called Curtin and McConkie, and that just so happens to be the church's legal defense firm. So that just seems a little jacked up to me that they would refer abuse cases to the legal defense team that defends the church. So it's like they're saying, hey guys, if there's any talk of any abuse case that's going to crop up, like let our legal guys know so we can stay ahead of the story and keep tabs on it. They do have a line in the next paragraph that says that if you are a leader or teacher, other than the stake president or bishop, that you should immediately contact your local authorities. But again, that feels like their hand was forced. They had to put a sentence in there about contacting the actual authorities, the police. instead of just referring it back into the church, because historically that's what the church has always done. Like they've pretty much, I've heard so many cases of members being shamed for actually going to proper legal authorities like the police about abuse cases, and their bishop's like, oh, you don't understand the atonement, you should have come to me first, you should have just kept this with us because we can deal with this. Or also cases where bishops or stake presidents have been told of abuse and they've told the abused, oh, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it, you don't need to talk to anyone else about this. Again, it's a very, very extremely broken system. The first thing that should happen when there is abuse is that local authorities, like the actual authorities, the police, should be contacted. The ecclesiastical authorities are authorities, if you want to call them that, are an afterthought, because yes, these people should no longer be serving in callings, and maybe they're not going to go to jail right away because the legal system takes a while to, get them there. But in their interim, they should not be serving in callings. So yes, the church should also be made aware of these abuse cases, but they are not the people that need to be handling the abuse and to be handling the consequences and the legal ramifications. Like that needs to be handed over to the law. So I found that really disturbing too about the video, is that there's still that kind of overarching, like, tell your church authorities, not your law authorities. I mean, they do have that sentence in there to call the police, but again, like the last sentence in the video too, like the voiceover of the training at the end said, if you are a bishop or a stake president and you learn of abuse, please contact the church's helpline immediately. So again, they're trying to stay in front of any cases. They're trying to keep their image clean, and if there is an abuse case, yeah, they'll let the members contact the police, but they also want their law firm to know about it as soon as possible. So yeah, that's problematic too. So, and I'm not advocating for like no contact between adults and children, obviously. I mean, there's plenty of good, wonderful people in the church, so many people that would never dream of hurting a child or sexually abusing in any way children or others. But statistically speaking, when you have an organization with millions of people in it, there's going to be some bad apples. There's going to be some pedophiles. There's going to be some sexual abusers it's just statistics. And the church needs to face the math of humanity, and also they need to face the fact that these people that they're calling to be leaders in the church, these are not divine callings by God. And if anyone should know this, the higher ups in the church should know this, because God's not talking to them, telling them to call people. And if you want to try to tell me that God is calling these bishops and stake presidents, then can you also tell me why God would be okay with letting sexual predators have a free reign over a congregation? There's been so many arrests, and it's not just like hearsay or people talking bad about the Lord's anointed. Like, these are actual cases. These are actual situations where abuse has happened, and it's been proven to have been happened. People have admitted to abusing people in their ward and others. And so if you're going to try to tell me that these are people that are called by God, then you're also saying that God's okay with this kind of behavior. So the church needs to admit these people are not called by God. They're not perfect. They're imperfect people called by imperfect people, and nobody, like, we're all just kind of doing the best we can, which, fine, that's great. I understand that nobody's perfect, but if you're going to put imperfect people into an extremely flawed system that has a propensity and it basically promulgates abuse, then we have major problems. So that's why we have systems in place to protect children. That's why we have systems that are designed to prevent abuse. And the Mormon Church is not a system that is designed to prevent abuse. It's designed to cover up abuse. So until the system is corrected in a way that it completely does not allow for abuse. I mean, I know there's never going to be a perfect system, but there's a lot of things that can be done to improve the system. Until that happens, you're going to keep seeing these cases of abuse. You're going to keep seeing these guys' mugs on the evening news that are like shocking everyone, like, oh my gosh, another bishop. Yeah, well, what did you expect? You put them behind closed doors with kids. Of course, statistically, if you put enough of these men behind closed doors with kids, there's going to be some that are creeps. So yeah. What else can I say about that video? It wasn't clinically done or professionally done in a way I didn't get anything from it, like, as far as from a clinical point of view that I was like, oh wow, I never knew that. It was just basically saying, like, abuse is bad, do not do it. And I mean, it had some merit to, like, saying what sexual abuse and coercion and grooming. It did talk about grooming, which I'm going to do a whole nother section on that, because I want to talk about that paragraph about coercion or grooming, and then I want to read that again, that letter that Joseph Smith wrote to Nancy Rigdon, the happiness letter, because that's exactly what he did to her. Coercion and grooming, exactly, word for word. Like, all of the things that it describes not to do in the church training are what Joseph Smith did to Nancy Rigdon. So that'll be another episode. But anyways, guys, those are some of my thoughts on the church's training. It's a band-aid on a broken system, and I hope you will sign the survey, or sorry, not the survey, what's it called? Petition that Sam Young put out and tried to stop children from being interviewed behind closed doors, one-on-one with adults. And that's it. I hope you like and subscribe, and have a fabulous day.